Our topic is, can we trust the Bible? How do we know that the books of the Bible that we have in our hands today have been reliably copied down through the years, going all the way back to the people who wrote them? And number two, what about the authors who wrote the original manuscripts? Can we tell that these people were honest and accurate? Well, the answer is yes. My guest is Dr. Norman Geisler, and I'd like you to listen.
The Bible, can we trust it? We've already talked about the Bible, who wrote it. It was written by men of God who were moved by the Spirit of God to produce the Word of God. We've talked about the Bible, are there any errors? Well, God can't err. The Bible is the Word of God, therefore the Bible can't err. Now let's take a look at the Bible, can we trust it? Are the documents reliable? Are the witnesses reliable? In order to understand whether the Bible is a trustworthy book, we've got to look at two basic things. Are the documents that we have in our hand, upon which our translations are based, are those reliably copied, accurately reproduced down through the years? Number one. Number two, what about the people who wrote the originals? Are these people who were honest, reliable, accurate? Has it been cross-checked by history, archaeology? Is the Bible, as we have it in our hands today, a trustworthy account of what was originally said? This may come as a great surprise to you in the light of all the criticism you read about the Bible in magazines and television and newspaper, but there's more evidence that the New Testament is an accurate historical record than for any book from the ancient world. Now, I know that's a big claim, but let's take a look at the evidence. First of all, we have more documents, more accurately copied documents with a higher percent of accuracy and a closer proximity to the original than any book from the ancient world. Take a look at this chart. Now notice the reliability of the New Testament documents. In the left column, we have other books from the ancient world. Hindu Mahabharata, Homer's Iliad, Herodotus' History, Thucydides, Plato, Demosthenes, and a number of other books. Then we have in the next column the date they were written. The next column, the earliest copies we have, and the important columns are the last couple columns. Now here's what I want to say to you about this information before we look at it in more detail. The Bible has more manuscripts, earlier manuscripts, and better copied manuscripts than any book from antiquity. So that if you cannot believe the Bible is historically reliable, you would have to throw out all of history, everything in high school, in college, in classical departments, every university in the world based on documents from the ancient world would have to be totally annihilated unless you're going to accept the Bible as historically reliable. Now let's take a look at the chart again. Notice the time gap for most other books from the ancient world. 1,300 years, Herodotus, Thucydides, 1,300 years. That's between the time it was written and the first copies. 1,400 years, 1,000. In fact, 750, as we have down there for Pliny on the bottom. Let's take one example, and it's right in the middle of the chart. Plato. He wrote around 400 BC. First copy from 900 AD. Gap, 1,300 years. In other words, there's 1,300 years of transmission. We don't have anything to verify how accurately it was copied during those years. And we have only 7 copies of Plato. We have only a few copies in 1,300 years. Now, the average for most books from the ancient world, the average is over 1,000-year gap between the time he wrote it and the first copies we have. Look at the Bible on the bottom of the chart. We have books as early as 114 A.D. We have the John Ryland fragment, and 114 A.D., that's probably only 25 years after the time that John wrote the book. And we have it from Egypt, that's all the way across the Mediterranean, in a small town. That means that we have copies that go back right within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses and contemporaries of the people who wrote them. We have whole books, the Bodmer Papyri, look on the bottom of the chart, from 200 A.D. and 250 we have most of the New Testament in the Chester Beatty Papyri, and from 325 and 350 we have the Vaticanus manuscripts, Sinaiticus manuscripts. We have more copies of the Bible, which I'll get to in a moment, closer to the original, that were more accurately copied than any book from the ancient world. In order to illustrate that, take a look at the chart again. Notice the next column, how many copies we have. Homer's Iliad, 643. That's the most of any book from the ancient world outside the Bible. We have 8 and 7 and 10 and 200. Down on the bottom, we have 5,686 handwritten Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. That's 10 times as many as the second and 100 times as many as some of the other books from the ancient world. Now, if you can't trust the Bible, you can't trust anything your history teacher tells you, your classics teacher tells you in any school or university in the country, because we have more manuscripts, earlier manuscripts, closer to the original than any book from antiquity.